Welcome to Hypnos Stories. I am so glad you're here tonight. Before we begin, I want to take just a moment to say something to you directly. If you enjoy this channel, if these stories have helped you find rest on a difficult night, or given you a few hours of peace in the middle of a busy week, please consider leaving a like on this video. It takes just a second, and it means more than you might think. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Hypnos Stories. Subscribing is completely free, and it ensures that new stories find their way to you each week. Stories inspired by ancient mythology, by the wonders of the natural world, by the deep and quiet places that exist just beyond the edges of ordinary life. We also love hearing from you in the comments. If there is a story you would like us to tell, a myth you have always been curious about, a place in the natural world you would like to visit through sound and imagination, a civilization whose gods and heroes you would like to know better, leave it in the comments below. Every suggestion is read. Every story request is considered. This channel exists because of you, and it grows because of you, and the stories we tell are shaped, more than you might realize, by what you ask for. So thank you for being here, for listening, for trusting us with your nights. And now, let us begin. Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle completely into whatever is beneath you. Feel the weight of your shoulders, releasing the weight of your arms, heavy and warm, the weight of your legs, sinking deeper. Take a slow breath in through your nose. Hold it gently for just a moment and let it go, slowly, through your mouth. Again, breathe in and out. With every breath, the day grows further away. The noise of it, the urgency of it, all of it softening now, dissolving like mist in the quiet of an early morning. There is nothing left to carry tonight, nothing left to solve, nothing left to prove, nothing left to finish, just this moment, just this darkness, just this breath. You have made it through another day, whatever that day contained, whatever it asked of you, whatever it took from you, whatever it left unfinished and waiting for tomorrow. It is behind you now. And this moment, right here, right now, belongs entirely to you. No obligations, no demands, no one needing anything from you. Just rest. There is a story waiting for you tonight. An ancient story. A story that has been told and retold for thousands of years, because something in it is true in a way that goes deeper than facts, deeper than history, deeper than anything that can be fully explained. It is a story made for exactly this moment, for exactly this quietness, for exactly the kind of rest that your body is already beginning to find. So breathe and let go, and follow me. Tonight, I am going to tell you about a journey that has been made every single night for as long as the sun has risen over the earth. A journey that the ancient Egyptians watched for 4,000 years and understood in a way that no other civilization quite managed. Not as a simple astronomical event, not as the mere rotation of a planet around a star, but as something far more profound, a struggle, a death and a resurrection, a God descending into darkness each evening, traveling through 12 hours of night and danger and transformation, and emerging each morning renewed, reborn, carrying the light back into a world that had waited through the long dark for its return. This is the story of Ra, God of the sun, Lord of the sky, the most important deity in the ancient Egyptian pantheon, whose daily journey across the heavens and through the underworld formed the central rhythm of Egyptian religious life for 3,000 years. Close your eyes. Let your breath slow even further. There is nowhere you need to be tonight. Just drift with me, back across the centuries to the banks of the Nile, to a civilization that watched the sky with more attention and more devotion than almost any people before or since. To understand Ra's night journey, we must first understand his day. Ra rose each morning in the east, as he has always risen, born anew from the waters of the primordial ocean that the Egyptians called Nun, the deep, dark, formless waters that existed before creation, that surrounded the ordered world on all sides, that held within them both the potential for life and the constant threat of the chaos that had existed before the gods gave the world its current shape. He rose as a child. In the mythology of Heliopolis, the great sun temple city, Ra was depicted each morning as Khipri, the scarab, the dung beetle, pushing the disk of the sun above the horizon, the way a scarab beetle pushes its ball of dung across the earth. The image is strange until you understand what the Egyptians saw in the scarab, a creature that appeared to create life from nothing, whose young seemed to emerge spontaneously from the earth, a symbol of self-creation and renewal that perfectly captured what the sunrise represented each morning, the sun pushing itself above the horizon, life creating itself out of the darkness. Let that image of renewal settle into you now. Something pushing upward toward the light from the darkness below. Patient and inevitable. Breathe and rest. As morning became midday, Ra transformed. He became Ra himself in his most powerful form, the blazing disk of the noon sun, high and fierce and uncompromising, the source of all heat and light and life in the Nile Valley and beyond. In this form, he was depicted as a man with the head of a falcon, wearing a sun disk on his head encircled by a uraeus, the rearing cobra of divine kingship, protector and destroyer in one, the serpent that spat fire at the enemies of the sun. In this form, Ra sailed across the sky in his solar bark. The solar bark of Ra was not simply a boat. It was, in the Egyptian understanding, the vehicle of creation itself, the craft that carried the sun across the sky each day, crewed by a company of gods whose specific roles were to protect Ra, to navigate the celestial waters, and to defend him against the forces of chaos that would, if they could, prevent the sun from completing its daily journey. Among the crew was Thoth, god of wisdom and writing, who kept the records of the journey and spoke the spells of protection when they were needed. There was Maat, goddess of truth and cosmic order, whose feather we already know from the Hall of Judgment, whose presence on the bark ensured that the sun's journey followed the proper path, the path that maintained the balance of the universe rather than allowing it to drift into chaos. There was Sia, the divine perception, and Hu, the creative word, abstract qualities so fundamental to existence that the Egyptians had given them divine form and placed them on the sun's own boat. And there were the rowers, unnamed gods, whose labor kept the bark moving across the celestial river, pulling with steady divine strokes through the waters of the sky. Together this crew carried Ra across the sky from dawn to dusk, navigating the celestial Nile, the river that the Egyptians believed flowed not just through Egypt, but through the heavens themselves, a great waterway that connected the world of the living and the world above and the world below in one continuous system of sacred flowing water. By afternoon, Ra began to age. This was the third transformation of the daily cycle. Ra as an old man, the sun growing lower in the sky, its light changing from the fierce white of noon to the warm gold and red of the afternoon, the heat diminishing, the shadows lengthening, the day beginning its slow decline toward the western horizon. The Egyptians called this form Adam, the complete one, the setting sun, the deity who would soon begin the journey that we have come together tonight to witness. The crew of the solar bark prepared for what was coming. The journey of the day was almost complete, and waiting on the other side of the horizon was the journey that required everything they had. Let that approaching threshold settle into you now, the western horizon of every day, the place where light becomes dark, where one journey ends and another stranger, more essential journey begins. Breathe and rest. At sunset, Ra descended, not metaphorically, not symbolically in the way that modern people might use the word. In the Egyptian understanding, literally, the sun crossed the western horizon and entered the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, the realm of the dead, a vast and complex landscape that existed beneath the earth, or beyond the horizon, or both simultaneously, a space that did not follow the ordinary rules of geography because it was not an ordinary place. The Egyptians described the Duat in extraordinary detail in the texts they painted on the walls of royal tombs. The Amduat, or what is in the underworld, is one of the most complete surviving descriptions of what they believed waited on the other side of the western horizon, a room by room, hour by hour account of everything Ra encountered in his 12-hour journey through the night. And this is what they saw: 12 hours, 12 gates, each guarded, 12 regions, each with its own name, and its own character and its own specific challenges for the sun god and his crew. The first hour of the night was called Vernis, and it was the entry, the moment when the solar bark crossed from the land of the living into the realm of the dead, passing through the great western gate that separated the two worlds. The gate was guarded. Everything important in the Duat was guarded. The gods who stood at the gates were fierce, enormous, carrying weapons that had no equivalent in the world above, tasked with the single purpose of ensuring that nothing passed through without being properly recognized and properly named and properly authorized. Ra was recognized. He was Ra. His authorization was simply his nature. The sun approaching the gate needed no other credential. The gate opened. The bark moved into the first region of the night. Here, in this first hour, the recently arrived dead gathered to greet him. Those who had died during the day and found their way to the underworld gathered along the banks of the river that ran through the Duat, watching the solar bark pass with an attention that was both reverent and desperate, because Ra's light, the light that had sustained them in life, briefly illuminated their dark realm as the bark passed. And in that brief illumination, they were, for a moment, awake and aware and fully themselves again. Then the bark moved on, the light moved on, and the darkness returned. Let that image move through you now. The light passing through the darkness, briefly illuminating everything it touches, then moving on. The darkness returning, patient and complete. Breathe and rest. The second hour of the night brought Ra into the realm of Vernus proper, a vast flooded region where the fields of the blessed dead, the Egyptian equivalent of paradise, lay submerged in the waters of the underworld Nile. Here lived the souls of those who had been judged worthy, who had passed the weighing of the heart, whose lives had been lived with sufficient ma'at, sufficient truth and rightness and alignment with the cosmic order, that they had been granted a place in the fields of Aru, the field of reeds, where the grain grew tall, and the water was sweet, and the work was the same good work of farming that they had known in life, but without the hardship, without the drought, without the fear of the tax collector and the overseer. Ra passed through their fields. His light fell on them as he passed, and they turned their faces toward it, the way all living things turn toward the sun, with a gratitude so complete that it required no expression, a gratitude that was simply the full opening of every available surface toward the warmth of the thing that makes all other things possible. The bark moved on. Hour 3 brought them to regions more complex, more guarded, more clearly in the territory of the dead rather than the blessed. The gates here were elaborate, not single doors, but multiple barriers, each one requiring specific knowledge to pass, specific spells, specific names, spoken aloud in exactly the right way. The priests who wrote the books of the dead, the scrolls placed in tombs to help the deceased navigate the afterlife, understood these gates as the central challenge of the underworld journey. To know the names of the guardians, to speak the correct words, was to move through. To be ignorant was to be stopped, to be questioned, to face consequences that the texts do not describe in detail, but whose severity is clearly implied by the care taken to prepare the dead with every piece of knowledge they might need. Ra knew all the names. He had always known them. He had been present when the guardians were created, when the gates were established, when the underworld was given its current shape. There was no door in the duat that could hold him, no guardian whose recognition he had not already earned. The bark moved forward, hour by hour, through regions that the living world had no equivalent for. Landscapes of fire and landscapes of deep water and landscapes of sand that stretched without horizon in any direction, populated by beings who were neither gods nor dead humans, but something else, something the Egyptians named and described and gave precise roles and functions to, beings who existed nowhere except in this realm, serving purposes that were necessary for the maintenance of the cosmic order, even though no living person would ever see them or speak to them or need to think about them at all. Let the strangeness of this place settle around you now. A realm that exists beyond the ordinary borders of experience. Vast and complex and perfectly ordered in its own strange way. Breathe and rest. The deepest and most dangerous hours of the night were the middle ones. Hours 4, 5, and 6 brought Ra into the parts of the duat that were furthest from either the western entrance or the eastern exit, the hours of absolute midnight, when the sun was as far as it ever got from the world of the living, buried deep in the earth, the light of it completely invisible to anyone standing on the surface above. These hours were called the hours of Sokar. Sokar was one of the oldest gods in the Egyptian pantheon, a funerary deity associated with the desert necropolis west of Memphis, depicted as a mummified falcon whose silence and stillness conveyed something fundamentally different from the active, dynamic qualities of most Egyptian gods. The realm of Sokar was the deepest darkness in the Duat. Here the paths narrowed and the water disappeared, and the sandy ground became treacherous, and the gates were more heavily guarded than any others in the entire underworld. Here too was where Apophis waited. Apophis, called Apep in some traditions, the great serpent of chaos, was the supreme enemy of Ra, the single force in the entire Egyptian cosmos that existed in permanent and irreconcilable opposition to the sun god and everything the sun represented. Apophis was not a god exactly. He had not been created. He had not been born. He had simply existed from before the beginning of things, in the darkness that preceded creation, a vast serpent of formlessness and chaos whose only desire, if chaos can be said to desire anything, was to undo what had been made, to swallow the sun, to return the world to the undifferentiated darkness of the void from which it had been raised. Every night, as the solar bark passed through the deep hours of the Duat, Apophis attacked, not once, every night, without exception, without variation, without any diminishment of his power or his determination, simply because he had failed every night before this night, and every night before that one. He lay coiled in the darkness, vast and patient, waiting for the moment when the bark would be within reach. And then he struck. The battle that followed was not a small skirmish. It was the single most important event in the entire Egyptian cosmos. A conflict so fundamental and so consequential that the priests believed human prayer and ritual could affect its outcome, that the spells recited in the temples each night, the offerings made before dawn, the specific prayers composed and performed by the clergy of Ra across Egypt were not symbolic gestures, but genuine contributions to the battle happening in the underworld, genuine additions to the power arrayed against the serpent of chaos. Set, who in the daylight mythology was so often the villain, the murderer of Osiris, the usurper of the throne, here in the night journey played a different role entirely. Set stood at the prow of the solar bark, armed with a great spear, and when Apophis struck, it was Set who drove the spear into the serpent's body. Set, whose fierce and violent nature was, in this context, exactly the right tool for exactly the right purpose. Because chaos cannot be defeated with wisdom, or with patience, or with diplomacy, but only with the direct and overwhelming application of force. The serpent was repelled. The bark moved on. Let that battle settle into you now. Every night, without fail, the same struggle, and every night, without fail, the same outcome. Light persisting through the very worst the darkness can offer. Breathe and rest. But the battle with Apophis was not simply a battle. It was also, the ancient Egyptians understood, a transformation. Because in the deepest hour of the night, in the sixth hour, the hour of absolute midnight, the hour of Sokar, the hour when Ra was furthest from both the world he had left and the world he was traveling toward, something extraordinary happened. Ra merged with Osiris. For 1 hour, the sun god and the lord of the dead occupied the same space, the same form, the same existence. This was the moment of deepest sleep and deepest mystery, the moment when the living principle of the sun, traveling through the realm of the dead, encountered the dead principle of Osiris eternally at rest in his underworld throne. In their union, each gave the other something essential. Osiris gave Ra the power of death, the deep rest, the total surrender, the complete release of the self that allows genuine renewal. A sun that simply kept going, that never stopped, that never died, even in symbol, could not be genuinely reborn. Something must end before something can begin. The sun must truly die before it can truly rise. And Ra gave Osiris the power of the sun, warmth, light, the animating force that made even the dead briefly alive again as the bark passed through their realm. For a few hours each night, the dead were not simply preserved, but genuinely present, genuinely aware, genuinely themselves. And this was because the sun had come among them and given them temporarily something of what it always gave to the living. The union lasted 1 hour, 1 hour of perfect stillness and perfect integration, the sun and the dead resting together in the deepest point of the night, neither moving nor changing, simply being. And then it was time to move again. The Barke resumed its journey. Ra resumed his separate form, but he was not the same Ra who had entered that hour. Something had changed, something that could not be fully named or described, but that the texts gestured toward with careful language about renewal and rejuvenation and the restoration of what time had diminished. Ra, emerging from his union with Osiris, younger than he had gone in, more vital, carrying within him now the seeds of the morning that was still hours away, but already, in some essential sense, beginning. Let that rest within you now. The union of opposites that makes renewal possible. The deep midnight of every night that holds within it already the morning it will become. Breathe and rest. The 7th hour brought the serpent Apophis again, because Apophis always came again. This was something the ancient Egyptians understood about chaos that is perhaps the most useful thing they understood. It does not simply go away when defeated. It is not something that can be finally, permanently, comprehensively destroyed. It exists in permanent opposition to order, and the nature of that opposition is that it renews itself as surely and as consistently as the order it opposes. You do not defeat Apophis once. You defeat Apophis every night. And the morning comes not because the battle was won once, long ago, and has remained settled ever since, but because it is won again and again and again, every single night, by the combined effort of Ra and his crew and Set's spear, and the prayers of the priests, and the offerings made at the temples, and the spells spoken in the dark before dawn. The world is not held in order by a single ancient victory. It is held in order by continuous effort, continuously renewed. This was, for the ancient Egyptians, not a frightening understanding, but a comforting one. It meant that what humans did mattered, that the prayers spoken in the temples were not simply expressions of piety, but genuine contributions to the maintenance of the cosmic balance, that the living and the divine were partners in the ongoing work of keeping the world ordered and the sun rising. The 7th hour's battle was fierce. The Amduat describes it in detail. Apophis, enormous and determined, attempting to swallow the waters of the underworld river and beach the solar bark in the dry mud, stopping the journey entirely. The crew fought back with everything they had. The gods in the Barkya spoke spells of restraint and binding. Set wielded his spear with the full violence of his nature, and Apophis was again repelled. The waters of the river were released from the serpent's belly. The bark floated free. The journey continued. Hours 8, 9, and 10 brought Ra through regions that were less immediately dangerous than the middle hours, but still complex, still filled with the intricate landscape of the underworld. Gates and guardians, and the various categories of the dead, arranged according to their relationship to the cosmic order. The blessed in their fields, the damned in their particular purgatorial conditions, the neutral in their twilight wandering. In each region, the light of the solar bark briefly illuminated everything it passed, and in each region, the dead turned toward the light. This detail, repeated in the texts for every hour of the journey, carries something deeply human within it. The simple, fundamental orientation toward light that is not something learned, but something prior to learning, something embedded so deep in the nature of living things that even the dead in the Egyptian understanding retained it, even in the underworld, even in the darkest hours of the deepest night. They turn toward the light. Let that image stay with you now. The fundamental turning toward light that exists in everything alive. Something older than thought, older than choice, simply present, breathe, and rest. Hour 11 brought something the earlier hours had not. The first intimation of the coming dawn. Not light yet. Not any change in the visual quality of the underworld, which remained as dark in the 11th hour as it had been in the first. But something in the nature of the journey itself began to shift. The gates ahead took on a different quality. The guardians at them seemed oriented slightly differently, facing east rather than south, as if they too were aware of what was approaching. The crew of the solar bark became more active. The rowers increased their pace. Thoth spoke spells that were oriented not toward protection, but toward preparation, words that began the process of transforming Ra from his nighttime form back into the being who would cross the daytime sky, reconstituting from the deep merger with Osiris, the blazing vital presence of the morning sun. The solar bark was not traveling through night any longer. It was traveling toward morning, and even the dead in the regions the bark passed through in these final hours seemed to feel it, a stirring, a quickening, something that was not quite hope, but was perhaps the condition that makes hope possible, a sense that the darkness, however total and however long, was approaching its natural limit. There is something the Amduat describes in the 11th hour that has always struck those who study it as particularly beautiful. The gods of the night, the deities who served and existed in the underworld, whose entire purpose and nature was oriented toward the dark, began in this hour to push the solar bark from behind, to add their own strength to the momentum of the approaching dawn, though the dawn would, when it came, return them to their own darkness and remove the presence of the sun from their realm for another day. They pushed anyway, because they understood something that the serpent Apophis never could, that the sun rising was not simply good for the living world above, it was good for everything. It was the axis around which all of existence turned, and its regular, reliable daily renewal was the thing that made possible every other thing, including the underworld itself, including their own continued existence in it. The serpent of chaos sought to swallow the sun because it could conceive of nothing beyond its own immediate hunger. The gods of the underworld pushed the sun toward the horizon because they could conceive of something larger than themselves. Let that image settle into you now. The willingness to contribute to something larger than your immediate situation, to push toward a dawn that will return you to your own darkness, because the light matters more than your comfort. Breathe and rest. Hour 12 was the last hour, the hour of transformation. The texts describe it as a narrow passage, a great serpent, not Apophis, but a different serpent, a divine one, a serpent who served rather than threatened, whose body formed a long tunnel through which the solar bark had to pass. The barque entered the serpent's tail and traveled through its body, and as it traveled through, the crew and the barque and Ra himself were transformed, not swallowed, not destroyed, but remade. The way something passed through a crucible comes out on the other side, fundamentally different from what it was when it went in. When the barque emerged from the serpent's mouth, it had become the morning bark. Ra had become Kipri again, the young sun, the scarab, the self-created, pushing the disk of light above the horizon with the same powerful rolling motion that had begun every day since the first day. The underworld gods who had pushed from behind fell away, returned to their own realm. The guardians of the final gate opened it, and the solar bark rose, up through the eastern horizon, into the sky that the watchers on the Nile Valley floor could see. The priests at the temples turned east in the pre-dawn darkness and waited. The farmers who would work the fields stood at the edge of the river and watched. The birds in the reeds along the Nile fell silent for a moment before beginning the morning chorus that had greeted every dawn since there had been birds to greet them. And the sun came, first as a brightening of the sky, a lightening of the dark that was so gradual it was impossible to say exactly when it began. Then as a color, not light yet, but the suggestion of light, a warmth in the eastern sky that was not quite gold and not quite red, but something between them, the color of something enormous about to begin. Then the first arc of light above the horizon, brilliant and complete and absolutely reliable, as it had been yesterday, as it would be tomorrow, as it had been for longer than the human mind can easily hold. Ra had made the journey. He had descended into the darkness and traversed its 12 hours, and fought the serpent of chaos, and rested in the deepest midnight with the Lord of the dead, and emerged renewed into the light, and the world received him. Let that rising settle into you now, the light returning after the long night, not because it was promised, but because it was worked for, not because the darkness relented, but because the light pushed through. Breathe and rest. The ancient Egyptians who developed and maintained this mythology over 3,000 years were not simply telling a story about the sun. They were telling a story about everything, about how the world works at its most fundamental level, about the relationship between darkness and light, between death and renewal, between the forces that would undo what has been made and the forces that continuously remake it. They were telling a story about what it means to persist. Ra did not rise each morning because nothing tried to stop him. He rose each morning because he kept going despite everything that tried to stop him, because his crew kept rowing, because Set kept driving the spear into the serpent's body, because the gods of the underworld kept pushing from behind, because the priests kept saying the prayers in the dark before dawn. He rose because the effort was made. Every night, without exception, without the comfort of knowing for certain that this particular night's effort would succeed, only the knowledge that it always had before, and the willingness to proceed on that basis, to do the necessary work in the darkness, because the darkness is exactly where the necessary work happens. This is perhaps the most honest thing the ancient Egyptians ever said about the nature of existence. The light does not simply exist. The light is made every day by everything in the cosmos that is willing to contribute to its making, including, in their understanding, you. The prayers spoken before dawn, the offerings made in the dark, the simple act of living according to Ma'at, according to truth and balance and right action, was itself a contribution to the cosmic project of keeping the sun rising, keeping the order maintained, keeping the serpent of chaos from winning the nightly battle. You mattered, not in a grandiose, world historical sense, but in the specific, daily practical sense of someone who keeps doing what is right and what is true, because the accumulated weight of everyone doing what is right and what is true is the single most powerful force, arrayed against the forces of chaos. You're part of the crew of the solar bark, every day, whether you know it or not. And now the story is complete. Ra has risen, bright and complete, above the eastern horizon once more, and the Nile Valley below him is golden and alive and receiving the warmth that makes everything possible. Somewhere beneath the surface of the world, the solar bark is already moving through the underworld again. The crew is rowing. Set stands at the prow, spear in hand. The dead are turning toward the light as it passes, and Ra, at the center of it all, is making his way through the dark toward the dawn that waits on the other side. As he always has, as he always will. And so the story ends, as all stories must end, not with a final tidy resolution that leaves nothing unresolved, but with the quiet sense that something has been completed, that a journey has been made, that you have traveled somewhere ancient and returned gently to this moment, to this darkness, to this warmth, to this slow and steady breath. Your body is heavy now. Your mind is still. The thoughts that were moving through you when this evening began have settled. The way leaves settle after a long wind has passed through them, slowly and completely, until the air is still again, and the only sound is the quiet of a world at rest. There is nothing left to carry, nothing left to figure out, nothing waiting for you in this moment except the rest that your body has been asking for, and that you have finally given it permission to take. You have done enough today. You have been enough today. Whatever the day asked of you, you met it. And now it is time to let the day go, completely, without reservation. The way the sun lets go of the sky each evening, completely and without hurry, trusting that it will rise again when it is time, trusting that the night will hold what the day has released. Let your breath find its own rhythm now, slower than before, deeper than before, the breath of someone who is no longer trying to do anything at all, just breathing, just being, in and out, in and out. The ancient world is quiet tonight. The gods have returned to their halls. The heroes have found their rest. The rivers and the forests and the deep places of the earth are still. And you are part of that stillness now, held by it, carried by it, safe within it. There is nowhere you need to go tonight. nothing you need to become. No version of yourself that needs to be maintained or performed or presented to anyone. Just you, here, in the dark, breathing, resting, already without any effort at all, doing exactly what you need to do. If sleep comes now, let it come. Welcome it the way you would welcome an old friend arriving after a long journey, without fuss, without ceremony, with only the simple and complete relief of something that belongs arriving exactly when and where it belongs. And if sleep takes a little longer, that is all right too. There is no urgency here, no deadline, no correct pace at which sleep must arrive. Just this breath, and this one after that. Each one carrying you a little further from the day, a little deeper into the quiet, a little closer to the rest that is already waiting for you just beneath the surface of this moment. We will be here again. Another story, another night, another journey into the ancient and the quiet and the true. Until then, sleep well, dream gently, and thank you truly for spending this time with Hypnos Stories. Good night.